Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Hey Amud Beis. 3 lines from the top. The Mishnah had stated that Rabbi Yehuda said that after everybody bought their Korban Pesach, we should take a kois, a cup, and fill it up with the dam that's on the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, because maybe somebody who brought the Korban Pesach, that dam never made it to the Mizbeach. It spilled on the ground. Whereby, if you take a cup of dam that was then mixed with all the other dam, there's some of that dam inside of this cup, and then you then throw it on the Mizbeach, it'll fulfill that person's choiv. The Chacham were not in agreement with that, and now the Brisa states the following. Tanya, Omar lehen Rabbi Yehuda lechacham. Rabbi Yehuda wants to prove to the Chachamim that this is the right way to do. L'divreichem, according to your words, Lama poikekin es ha'azara. Why do you then plug up the azara? Hooray, by plugging up the azara, it's going to cause all of the dam to get mixed together. Omru loi. They responded to Rabbi Yehuda. Shevachu livnei Aaron sheyelchu ad arkoivoseihem bedam. It's a praise for the Kohanim that they should walk into the Beis HaMikdash with dam up into their knees. And therefore that's why it's poikekin. I asked the Gemara, how could it be that the Chachamim saying to Rabbi Yehuda that the Kohanim are walking on dam, isn't dam going to be a chatzitza? The feet of the Kohanim have to then be directly on the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, otherwise there'll be a chatzitza. So if there's dam, it's chaytzitz. The Gemara says, lach hi ve'ena chaytzitz. Since it's liquid, it's not considered to be a chatzitza. Kedetan, like I said in the following brisa, in regards to somebody who's toivel, either himself or a kli, it states hadom v'hadyoi v'hacholov v'hadvash, whether it's blood or ink, milk or honey, yeveshim chaytzitzin, lachin ein chaytzin. Only if it's dry does it then make a chatzitza between the person who is toivel and or the thing that he's toivel. But if it is lach, if it is moist, if it is wet, then it doesn't pose a chatzitza. So too over here, the dam that's on the floor of the mizbeach does not pose a chatzitza for the kohanim. Ask the Gemara, v'ha kamitav say me'anayhu, but still they're dirtying their big day kahuna. V'tnan, it states in the Mishnah, Hoyu begada mitushdoshin v'ovad avoidasa psula. If a kohen works in the avoida with begadim that are meluchlochim, that are dirty, then it's poisil the avoida. So therefore, the dam that will then reach their clothing as they are walking in the dam certainly will then be a problem and poisil the avoida. If you're going to say that they lift up their michnosayim, so that they don't become soiled from the dam. Vehatanya, behold, it states in the Pasuk, in the Brisa Midoi Bad, and the Brisa explains, Midoi Kimidosoi, Shelo Yechsar Velo Yoisir. In other words, if you're going to pick up the Michnasayim and then have it be held by the belt, then it's not going to be considered to be fitted onto the Kohen's body. And the Pasuk requires that it be not Chaser, not Yoisir. So therefore, that's not a possibility. So Shuv, the Gemara is asking, how could it be that the Kohanim are going to be walking in this blood? It'll be malachlech the begadim, and it'll poisel the avoida. Answers the Gemara, bohoileches evorin lekevesh delav avoidahi. We're talking about that they're walking to bring the Evarim to the ramp of the Mizbeach, and that's not considered to be an Avoida. Shortly, the Gemara asks, but still, what about the other Avoida? But right now, the Gemara is focusing on the fact that when he's walking with the Evarim to the Kevesh, that's not considered to be Avoida, and that's not a problem. Ask the Gemara even on that, Veloi, is it not? Veho mediboi kehuna Avoidahi, from the fact that it requires the kahuna to then bring these Evarim to Kevish, it's included in Avoida. The Tanya, like it says in the following Brisa, V'hikriv hakoyin es hakol hamizbecha. Zu holaches av Evarim la Kevish. So we see that even bringing the Evarim, the parts, the limbs of the animals to be brought onto the Kevish, the ramp of the Mizbech, is also considered to be Avoida. So we're left with the question, how could the Kohanim go ahead and walk in this dam? Ella behoileches eitzim lema'arocha, the lav avoidahi. Rather, we're talking about where the Kohanim would then bring the eitzim for the pyre, the fire that would be on the mizbeach, and that's not considered to be avodah by bringing the eitzim. Okay, now the Gemara says, but still, behoileches eivarim lakevesh uveholeches dam miho hechi azli. How will they go? How will they walk when it comes to then bringing the eivarim to the kevesh, or when they are going to then do the avodah in terms of bringing the dam to the mizbeach? Hooray, they're going to be walking into dam, and that will be poistil the avodah. Answers Gemara, the masge, the mesage a itztebei. They are walking on the itztebei. Itztebei are the things that are the these are on the ground of the mizbeach of the Beis Hamikdash, and they are like amudim. They're like places where they are connected to the ground, so it's not considered to be a chatzitza. And they're walking on the itztaba. The itztaba itself is not a problem. It's like walking on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, since it's raised, they're able to then avoid the dam being malachlech their begadim. The Mishnah says, Keitzad toilin umafshitin v'chulei karu v'hoitziu es emurav nosnam b'megis lahaktiram. If you read it all together, it sounds like those who are being mafshit, who are flaying the animal, they take out the innards, and then it says that they are maktir those innards, they burn those innards. The Gemara asks right away, but otuhu gufe have mekatir lahu. How can it be that the non-Kohen who removes the innards from the animal is also then burning the mizbech? The burning has to be done by the Kohen. Answers the Gemara, Eimo lahakdiron al gabe hamizbech. You have to say that it's not done by the non-Kohanim. It's the Kohanim that are then going to take those parts and they're going to then burn them on the Mizbeach. Yotza bas kas rishoina v'chulei. Says the Gemara Tano, Kol echod ve'echod noisein pischoi be'oroi umafshil la'acharov. After the carbon, they would bring the carbon Pesach in its or in its hide, and they would put it behind them. They were mafshil la'acharav, and they would go home. Omar Rav Ilish Tayoyus. They were like Arab merchants. They were mechabev the mitzvah of Korban Pesach so much so that they would actually carry it on their back when they would go home. Hadron aloch tamid nishchat. The sixth parak begins the following: Elu dvorim ba'Pesach. These are the following things that the Korban Pesach pushes off to then do even on Shabbos. What is the general heter for being doichin es HaShabbos? When the Korban Pesach is doing things that must be done on Shabbos, and lichatchila, if they're not done on Shabbos, then those are the things that are permitted to be done on Shabbos. If it could, however, be done before Shabbos or after Shabbos, then it's not doichin es HaShabbos. Says the Mishnah, starts off by saying four things that are doiches HaShabbos. Shechitosoi, by being shoichet the Korban Pesach on Yudalit, even as it comes out on Shabbos, is doiches HaShabbos. Vizirikas domoi, and sprinkling the blood on the Mizbeach is doiches HaShabbos. These are avoidas that must be done on Yudalit, and therefore if Yudalit comes out to be on Shabbos, it's doiches HaShabbos. Umichui, this is piercing the intestines, so that the refesh, the parts of the waste, will then be able to then be extracted, and that's in order for that the innards will not become ruined and become masriach, since those are things that have to be eaten by the bailim as well. That would be a problem. Therefore, that must be done on Yudalis, so it doesn't then ruin the innards. The Bnei Ma'ayim, v'haktoras chalovov, and also burning the chalovov. That also is going to be something that is permissible, And here's a chiddush, because even though technically the haktaras chalavov can be done at night, but that's only b'di evid. Lichatchila, they're supposed to be burned during the day. And therefore, we say there's a principle, and the principle is that mitzvah that is chaviva alav is doiches HaShabbos. And Chazal are telling over here, this is one of the principles that we find in regards to then burning the fats on the Mizbeach, even on Shabbos. Mitzvah b'shaitzoi is chaviva alav, and that's doiche. The Gemara now brings two cases that are not doiche, and says the following: Aval tzliyosoi, when you roast the meat of the Korban Pesach, that can be done Motzei Shabbos, and therefore it's not doiches HaShabbos. There's no mitzvah to then roast the meat that will be eaten on the night of Tesvav. V'hadachas krovov, and the washing out the krovov, since we talked about before that the heter of piercing the inner to take out all of the excrement, all the things that are the waste, that then prevents any of the innards to become disgusting and putrefied, then there's no need to do hadochas krovov, and therefore it's not doiches HaShabbos. Einon doiches HaShabbos. Until now, there's no machloikis whether those things are doiche or the things are not doiche. But now the Mishnah brings a machloikis for the following: harkavosoi, when carrying the animal to the Beis HaMikdash, v'havoso michus l'tchum, and going outside the tchum, even though you do not carry the animal itself, but by leading the animal, if it's going to be outside the tchum, v'chatichas yibaltoi, and taking off the yabeles, a wart, a growth that will make the animal a mum, ein doiches HaShabbos. The Tanna Kama says it's not doiches HaShabbos. Now, these are three things that are Isur D'Rabbanan. The first thing, harkavosoi, because the animal is noises as atzmoi, when one carries it, it's considered to be an Isur D'Rabbanan. And even if he doesn't carry it, he brings it from outside the tchum, we're assuming that tchum is D'Rabbanan. That's most of the shitos, is that tchum is D'Rabbanan. And taking off the yabeles, since it's not done with a kli, it's done either with the nails, with one's hands, or even if one's teeth, that would be midirabbanan. Akoponim, according to Tanna Kama, those are things that are not doiches HaShabbos. Rabbi Eliezer, oimer doichin. Rabbi Eliezer, he says they are doichin. Now, Rabbi Eliezer says not only the Rabbanans are doichin, we learn in Masechet Shabbos that he holds all machshirei mitzvah are doiche, even deraisas on Shabbos. So therefore, in regards to a bris milah, if a person does not have the milah knife, according to Rabbi Eliezer, he can then go ahead and fashion a milah knife, or he can bring it from the Rishus HaRabim and into the Rishus HaYachid in order to perform the mitzvah of milah. But Al Kopanim, he argues on the Tanna Kama over here that in regards to the D'Rabbanan, certainly you can be doiche. Omer Rabbi Eliezer v'haloi dvarim v'haloi dinhu. He wants to prove himself that even according to you that hold that midrabbanans cannot be doiche, I'll show you that they could with the following kal v'chomer. Ma im shchita shi mishum malacha doiches HaShabbos. When it comes to shchita of the Korban Pesach, that is doiche Shabbos. You agree, and that's a malacha de'oraisa. These three things that are only derabbanans, certainly then should be doiches HaShabbos. Omar le Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua argues back on Rabbi Eliezer, and he says you can't bring such a kal v'chomer because Yom Tov yochiach. Yom Tov will prove against the kal v'chomer. Shehitiru boy mishum b'melacha v'aser mishum shvus, because they are matir oichel nefesh. They can cook on Yom Tov for the tzarich oichel nefesh, which would be a melacha deraisa. That's mutter to do, and yet the Torah says, although that's mutter, but you cannot go ahead and, let's say, bring food from outside the tichum, which is only derabbanan. Omar le Rabbi Eliezer, maze Yoshua. He argues back on Rabbi Yoshua. What is this? What is this that you're trying to argue against my proof? Maraya rishus lemitzvah. How can you bring me a case of rishus by bringing food on Yontif? Eating on Yontif would only be a rishus. Here we're talking about a mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So therefore, you don't have a way of disproving my Kal Vachomer. Heishi Rabbi Akiva. Now Rabbi Akiva enters the picture and then proves against Rabbi Eliezer. V'omar, he says, Hazah toichiach. Hazah is also midrabanan. We're talking about a person who is somebody who's tamei. He's tamei meis, and therefore he has to be sprinkled with the mei chatos on the third day and on the seventh day to become pure. So now it's the seventh day, and it comes out to be on the day of Shabbos, which is also Yudal Nisan, when you have to bring the Karban Pesach. So for him to bring the Karban Pesach, he has to then be sprinkled with the Mechatos on Shabbos. And we learn that even though it's only Midrabanan, because it's Nire Kimitzakein, nonetheless, we say that it's also to do on Shabbos. Shehi Mishum Mitzvah, V'hi Mishum Shvus, Ve'enu Dorches HaShabbos. Even though Hazah is a mitzvah, because it'll then permit that which was Tameh, that person to become Tahor, and now bring the Karban Pesach, still, even though it's only Midrabanan, it's not able to be done, it's Osir. So if that's the case, then Af Ato, Al Tisma Al Elu She'af Al Pi Shehin Mishum Mitzvah, Ve'hei Mishum Shvus, Lo Yitchu Es HaShabbos. Then do not then be in wonderment, Rabbi Eliezer, that these three things that we're speaking about, that is only an Isser D'Rabbanan, which is done for the mitzvah Karban Pesach, is not nidche, it's not doiche es HaShabbos. Omar lo Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says back to Rabbi Akiva. Ve'aleh anidan. That itself I'm proving. Now, I would say that indeed Hazah would be mutter, since it is a shvus and it's for a mitzvah. Uma im shchita shehi mishum melacha doiches HaShabbos, just as shchita, which is a malacha di'araisa, is doiches HaShabbos for the mitzvah of Karban Pesach. Hazah shehi mishum shvus eno din shedoiches HaShabbos. When one does hazah, which is merely an Isser D'Rabbanan, it's nira kemesaken. That itself, but is done for a mitzvah, can be doiches HaShabbos, certainly. On top of Samech Vav Amud Aleph, Omar lo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva turns to Rabbi Eliezer and says, Oy chaluf. Or perhaps the opposite. We can say the opposite Kal Vachomer. If indeed the shvus of Hazah is osir, then Kal Vachomer Kol Shekain, then the shchita, which is deraisa, cannot be done. Ma im Hazah shehi mishum shvus eino doiches HaShabbos. If Hazah, which is only derabanan, like I said, the Isser D'Rabbanan of Nira Kimisakein, and although it's true it's for a mitzvah, it's not doiches HaShabbos. Shchita she mishum malacha eno din shelo tidche es HaShabbos. Then shchita, which is a malacha deraisa, certainly then should not be doiches HaShabbos, even though it's for a mitzvah of Karban Pesach. Omar Rabbi Eliezer Akiva akarta mashikosev b'Torah. You're uprooting what the Torah says in regards to that allowing us to be sheichet a Karban Pesach on Shabbos. It says b'moy adoy bein bechol bein b'Shabbos. In the pasuk that teaches us that Karban Pesach says b'moy adoy, teaching me whether it's during the week or on Shabbos. That means it's doiches HaShabbos. Omar loy Rebbe. Now Rabbi Akiva says to his Rabbi Eliezer, Haba have li moyed le'elu kimoyed l'shchita. In other words, he's saying to Rabbi Eliezer, that which is done on the moed itself, it has to be done like shchitas, Karban Pesach. You're right. That is doiche. But if something that does not have to be done on Yom Tif, on Yudal, which would be on Shabbos, it can be done before Shabbos. Like, for example, bringing the animal outside the tchum into where you need it to be brought to the Beis HaMikdash, or taking off the abeles, that can be done before Shabbos. And therefore, you cannot learn out one from the other. Shchita has to be done dafka on Yudalit, and if Yudalit comes out of Shabbos, it's mutter. Whereas the other things, since they could have been done before Shabbos, there's no heter to be doiches HaShabbos. Rabbi Akiva explains, Kol melacha she'efshar la'asosoi me'erev Shabbos eino doiches HaShabbos. Any melacha that does not have to be done on Shabbos, because done before Shabbos, or after Shabbos, then is not doiches HaShabbos. Shchita she'i efshar la'asosoi me'erev Shabbos doiches HaShabbos. Whereas shchita, which has to be done on Shabbos, because the Karban Pesach must be brought ben habarim on Yud Dalet, and if Yud Dalet comes out to be on Shabbos, b'moy ado teaches us that is doiches HaShabbos. But again, anything that can be done before or after Shabbos is not going to be doiche es hashabis.